The number of people who are really, really struggling with Joseph Smith, his leadership, and feeling like he's a fallen prophet, that number is growing. And unfortunately, it's growing among some of the upper leadership of the church. And you have a group in February of 1837 who go to the Kirtland Temple, and they have this big meeting where they are prepared and ready to declare Joseph as a fallen prophet and sustain David Whitmer as the new leader of the church. Well, unfortunately for that group, Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball got wind of that meeting, of all the people who felt like Joseph was a fallen prophet, and they had assembled in the temple. So Brigham and Heber C. Kimball are there as well. And they listen to all of the arguments. They listen to all the statements. At which point, Brigham Young comes to the front of the room to address the crowd. And here's what he says. Joseph was a prophet, and I knew it, and that they might rail and slander him as much as they pleased. They could not destroy the appointment of the prophet of God. They could only destroy their own authority. And then this line, cut the thread that binds you to the prophet and to God, and sink yourselves to hell. That's what he tells them. They didn't end up putting David Whitmer in charge that night. And this is just a very, very tumultuous and very difficult time. Now, did you catch this? It was just last week in the episode where we were talking about the dedication of the Kirtland Temple and the outpouring of this Pentecostal experience with angels and the Spirit of God, like a fire is burning, and the keys being restored, and this mountain peak of revelation. And now here we are, just a few short months when the struggles really start ramping up, and now it's feeling almost like everything's coming apart at the seams, not just in Kirtland, but over in Missouri. Keep in mind, they'd been kicked out of Jackson County into Clay County. Now they're being kicked out of Clay County, and they're moving further north into Davies and Ray and Caldwell counties, going further north until they're going to end up in far west. This is a very, very difficult time. Now, Joseph Smith is in the Kirtland Temple on June 4th of that year, 1837, when he comes up to Heber C. Kimball, who's a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and he whispers in Heber's ear that the Spirit has whispered to him, send my servant Heber over to England to begin the work of spreading the gospel in England. Heber's not feeling qualified for this. He doesn't feel educated. He doesn't feel smart enough, capable enough. And so he says, I want Brigham Young to go with me. But Joseph needed Brigham to stay in Kirtland. Brigham gets the title of the Lion of the Lord for a reason.
For a good reason.
He's not going to be, he's not going to surrender easily to anyone. And Joseph needs him in Kirtland. And so instead, we send a few other brethren with Heber C. Kimball on that mission. Now, that was early June. There's a little problem. Thomas B. Marsh is the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and he feels like Joseph has now overstepped his bounds.
Now let's remember, how old is the church? It's about 7 years old, and none of them had grown up in the church. There wasn't a handbook of general instructions. I mean, yes, we have these ongoing revelations, but it wasn't clear the role and interaction between the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12. And Thomas B. Marsh felt like, it's my job to give instructions to the apostles and to send them off on missions. And it's not Joseph's job to come take members of my quorum and send them on missions without talking to me. Even Parley P. Pratt was planning a mission. And so if you've ever been in any kind of relationship or organization where somebody makes a decision different than what you were hoping to make, or different than what you thought you had the authority to do, you can understand that when the stakes get a little higher, the conflict seems to be a bit more intense. And so there's a need to resolve this.
In fact, when he comes back into Kirtland and sees all of the fighting among his quorum, the quorum of the 12, and many of them, the Johnson brothers and others have become very vocal against Joseph. He's trying to unify them, but he's also got this struggle with Joseph. He actually goes to the home of Heber C. Kimball, knocks on the door and talks to Heber's wife, Valete Kimball, and he tells her, your husband is going to find no success on his mission because I didn't send him over there, and I'm the one who has the keys to send the quorum of the 12. It's not a great way to console a woman when her husband's been sent overseas
for who knows how long.
For who knows how long on this mission. So then he comes, as he's in Kirtland, he comes to Joseph with this wrestle and struggle. One of the ironies here is this revelation is given on July 23rd, 1837, which happens to be the exact same day where over in England, they're giving their very first public speech, their very first public sermon. And here he sits with Joseph saying, I've got some problems with this. And Joseph receives a revelation, section 112, and it's Thomas B. Marsh, president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles at the time, who is the scribe for his very own revelation. So he's the one writing this down. Notice how the Lord begins it. Verily, thus saith the Lord unto you, my servant Thomas, I have heard thy prayers, and thine alms have come up as a memorial before me, in behalf of those thy brethren who were chosen to bear testimony of my name, and ascended abroad among all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, and ordained through the instrumentality of my servants.
Don't you love this? I just love how God understands the foibles and follies of his children. And even though Joseph and Thomas Marsh had a bit of an intense conflict about this, suddenly there's this beautiful revelation, and God's like, Thomas, I know you. I know your deep, righteous desires to do good in building the kingdom. And I've invited you to participate in my work. This is not your work, Thomas. It's mine. And I will actually honor your righteous desires. I just love how God works with us.
It's beautiful that it's I who have called them on this mission. It wasn't you and it wasn't Joseph. It's me. They're proclaiming my name. It's missionaries in our church today go out, and whose name do they have on their plaques?
Not the name of the...
It's not the name of...
Thomas Marsh.
Thomas Marsh or the president of the church or the president of the Quorum of the 12. It's the name of Jesus Christ. He's the one who ultimately calls them. And remember President Monson's famous statement, whom the Lord calls, the Lord qualifies. So even though Heber and his companions didn't feel like they were fully qualified, in fact, I don't know very many missionaries who show up at the MTC saying, I am so prepared. I am going to be one of the finest missionaries in the history of the church. Bring it on. I just don't think that happens.